Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Ben, and welcome to our Pixel Platformer series. This is going to be part 10. I think we're on part 10, and this series has been made possible by the people who support me by purchasing my 1-bit Godot course, which is currently on sale until the end of the month. If you're interested in learning more about that, there's a link in the comment section below, in the pinned comment, and also in the description. In this video, we're going to be covering the moving spike enemies, which doesn't sound very impressive, I know, but what I'm going for is an enemy that moves around on a specific path. And so we're going to create an enemy that moves on a specific path and it loops on that path or potentially goes back and forth on that path. You can kind of decide, and then you can create different paths inside the editor for this enemy to follow. So it should be pretty fun. Last time we did the coyote jump, double jump, and jump buffer. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is make a new scene. And this scene is going to, it's not going to be a 2D scene. We're going to look for another node. What we're going to find here is a path 2D. So we need a path 2D, and this gives us access to a curve. And this being the root of our scene, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm thinking that that will allow us to easily create whatever curve we want for each new enemy. So we could potentially have these enemies have multiple in the inside of our level and have them move exactly how we want. Now, as a child of this, we need a path follow 2D. So the path defines a curve, and the path follow allows whatever it and its children to follow that curve. Okay, so there's two different nodes here. And for this top one, we're going to name this, we'll name it, let's see, moving spike enemy. It really is not a great name. Now, as a child of this, we're going to do an area 2D. We'll call this enemy, and we'll give it a sprite. And the sprite is going to use our characters packed, and we'll turn on region, and we'll come to our texture region, and we'll do grid snap. Wow, we could probably do pixel snap for this one, actually. We'll zoom in, and let's see. Select our enemy. Now, yeah, that's probably good. You could go, I think we would want to do a single pixel on each side here. I'm not actually sure. Let's just turn on our grid snap and set it to 9. That way we can be sure. It doesn't, it's not really that important, but wait, I thought it was 9. Are these different? These are different sized. What? We've never actually used, we've always used an animated sprite for these, I forgot. Huh. That's hilarious. I actually don't know the size of these. So yeah, we are going to go back to pixel snap, and we'll just do it exactly, because that should be fine for our game like this. Okay, now we're going to add our collision shape. And this is going to be, you know, you got to decide how much leniency you want the player to have on this. You know, we could just do this, and then they could barely touch these spikes and not get hit. Or we could even go in one more. I think I'll do this and see how this goes. Now we're going to need to add, let's see, a hitbox to our enemy, right? Wait a minute, our enemy doesn't actually need to be in area 2D. Let's actually change it. Change type, node 2D. So you can right click on our enemy here. And it's really easy. Just click change type and then select node 2D. And then we can just move this collision shape and make it a child of our hitbox. So now our scene tree looks like this: enemy, sprite, hitbox, and then the collision shape. And the enemy is now a node 2D instead of an area 2D, because it doesn't need to be an area 2D. Perfect. Let's see. This is going pretty well. So let's save this. And then we need to give it a curve. So we can define a curve using these up here. So I'm gonna, for now, I'm just gonna select the spike moving enemy, select the curve, and then select this little plus button and just draw in here to make a curve. Did that connect? I think it did. I think it did connect. Okay, so now we've got a curve. And we can actually run this scene without doing anything else, and you can see our enemy automatically starts at the very beginning of our curve. And that's because it's under this path follow 2D node. And if we were to change, so we have an offset and a unit offset. The offset is the path in pixels, and the unit offset is the path, but it's normalized between 0 and 1. So 0 is the start, and then 1 is the very end. And you can actually see as we move this unit offset, we can see it, the enemy moving along that path in the editor. It's really cool that it just automatically does this for us. Looks great. And we have it set to loop. And we have cubic interpolation. This isn't, we don't need to worry about that, but rotate is important, and you need to decide if you want your character to rotate as they're moving along this path or not. So you can see they're no longer rotating. And I could come into my enemy and go to the transform and into the path follow 2D and go into the transform and reset the rotation. So we turned off rotation and then we reset the rotation because it was messed up from earlier. And now the enemy moves along this path without actually rotating. Okay. And that is working pretty well. So the thing we want, though, is we want the enemy to automatically move along this path. Now there's a couple different ways we could actually do this. We could attach a script to our moving spike enemy and then get access to the path follow 2D and then manually adjust the offset in code using the dot unit offset property right here. So we could manually adjust this in code. But we can use an animation player inside of Godot to do this instead. So we're going to actually we're going to click on our root node and add a brand new scene or a brand new node to the scene, and it's going to be an animation player. Now we can set, we can click, that opens up this new tab down here, and we haven't covered animation players, but they're really powerful. So what we can do is click this right here and do a new animation, and we'll call this move along path. That should be good. And we're going to make this take 2 seconds. Well, that would be pretty fast though. 1, 2. Yeah, let's make it take 4 seconds. And you can see as we update how long this animation is, it updates this little area where we can set points. So while this tab is open, we're going to click on our path follow 2D, and it should leave your animation tab open still. Then we can come over to our unit offset, and there will be a little key icon next to it. And this is where you are in the animation. You can see, and we want to put this all the way at the start. And we want our unit offset to be 0. And then we can press this little key button. and it's going to ask us if we want to create, it's going to ask us if we want to do some things when we create, because it's going to create a key in our animation track here. And there's some additional things that we can do. We can have a reset track and we can use Bezier curves. We don't want the reset track, so we're going to uncheck that and just do create. The reset track just creates a brand new animation with some defaults, and it can be useful in certain situations, but we don't need it for this one. Okay, so now we have it at 0. Now we want to come to the very end, and we want to move our unit offset all the way to the very end and key that. Now we can actually play this animation with the play button, and you can see our unit automatically moves along the animation all the way across because it's animating this unit offset property right here from 0 to 1 across 4 seconds. Now these little keys down here that we set, you can actually move them around. So let's say 4 is pretty fast still, so we want to do 6. We can set this to 6, and then we can move this all the way to the end right here. Now it's going to oops, I accidentally hit run. Okay. We'll click on our animation player, and we'll click the play button here. Now you can see it's moving along our path a little bit more slowly. Now you have to answer to yourself, do you want this to go back to the start, or do you want it to loop? Now both of these are going to involve us turning on looping on our animation. So if we come here, right here at the end, there's a little button here that we can toggle to turn on looping. When it's green, looping is on. And now if we run the animation, it should play all the way through and then loop when it gets to the end. And there we go. Now our animation is looping and our enemy moves along this path just fine. Now if you want it to go to the start and then go back, what you can do is you can drag the end key right to about halfway. So that makes it so it goes to the end and then it goes back. And then it will start over and go to the end again. So that looks like this. Now, the back and forth, this kind of ping-ponging, usually looks best when your path, we click on our path here, we can adjust our points. When your path has, let's see, that didn't move the point. We need to select this so I can move them. There we go. And we can delete points too. If your path is something like this, where I'm hitting the wrong run button every time. Where your enemy goes along a path and then bounces back and goes the same way. So that's the difference. Usually this is because if your path isn't connected, then it kind of makes sense for it to ping pong. But if your path is connected, then it kind of makes sense for it to loop. And see? So in this case, looping feels weird because it's going to teleport to this location up here when it gets to the end of the path. So which one you set is up to you. I personally want mine to loop, and I'll just connect my paths. So that's how I'm going to leave mine at. Now we could actually click on the animation and rename it and call this one Move Along Path Loop. And then we could click on animation, and then we could duplicate, and then we could click on animation and then do rename and call this one Move Along Path Bounce, I guess. And then set this one to be the bounce. So then we have two animations, and it set a reset track somehow. That's okay though. Maybe when I duplicated the animation. That's interesting that it would do that. Anyways, now we have loop and bounce. So depending on the kind of path you set up, you could choose the one that you wanted in your animation player. So we've got our moving enemy now, and we're gonna actually come in here and I'm just gonna reset the curve so that there isn't a curve. And I'm going to set the enemy, or the path follow 2D, I'm gonna reset its position. And that should put it back up here at the start. And now we're gonna save our scene. And the reason I did that is because when we instance this enemy inside of our level, we want to create a curve for it then. And we don't want our enemy here to be way off over here on the side, because if it's not right here at the origin, when we instance it in the game, it will also be offset by that amount. So if we try to put the enemy here, it'll be offset clear over here if it's offset here. In fact, let me just show you what that looks like instead of saying it. It's always good to show. So let's grab our enemy. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you, so don't do what I'm doing right now. Oops. Shift. Nope. Well, that's good enough, I guess. It's only offset by a little bit, but we'll save here. Okay, so our enemy is offset. When we come into the world, if I drag our moving spike enemy, you can see that I've placed it right here, but it's offset over here, and that's because it's offset inside of this scene. So it's important to understand that concept, that it will be offset by that amount. It's kind of the origin relative to the center of the scene. Okay, now we have our enemy, and we want to stick this enemy somewhere. This seems like a good spot. Now we can, over here on our curve, we can do new curve 2D, and then we can come up here and select this, and we'll go here to here. Oops. Let's try this again. Okay, I'm gonna go here to here to here to here to here. Okay, and then I can save, and then our enemy is there, and when we run the game, that enemy, oh, so it's not playing. Why isn't it playing? We'll come back into our enemy scene and come back into our animation player, and you could have it, you could select a current animation, or you could have a script that auto plays it. There is a function for auto playing, which is this little toggle button right here, but we have to make sure we choose path loop and then auto toggle it. And now this animation will play by default right at the start. So I'm setting loop to be default, and it's set to automatically play. And now we have an enemy that moves around that space along a specific path. Really cool. And it's got a hurt box that will hurt us, so we have to avoid it. We don't want to touch it. Now let's try creating one that uses the ping pong. So we'll come down here. And actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna mess something up here. So we're gonna duplicate this enemy, and then I'm gonna move it. Whoops. Select the second enemy, and then move it. Can I do that? Maybe we need to select up here so they're not selecting the path anymore. It's still selecting the path. Not sure how to get it to not select the path anymore. I know, I'll use the arrow keys to move our enemy. Okay, so we're moving it over. Okay, so we have two. Now let's say we want an enemy that's, I'm using the arrow keys to move it. It's a bit awkward that I can't move it. I'll have to figure that out. Let's say we want an enemy that goes up and down right here, which is actually really evil, and we're like, oh, okay, so that we just make a new path, right? We come up, we delete these points on this path that we had before. Boom, delete this point right here. Uh-oh. What happened? deleted it over here too. And this is something I wanted to show intentionally because this happens a lot. The path is a resource. Remember how I said resources are shared? I think I said that in this series. Anyways, resources are shared, which means that we're actually modifying the exact same resource. That's not what we want to do. I'm going to do Control Z to get our point back. So on our second enemy here, we should come over here and set curve. We'll just clear it like this. And that makes it so that this enemy no longer references this same resource over here. We duplicated the enemy and it created that second curve. Now, if we click here, we should be able to easily move our enemy around, right? Although it is interesting that it's offset since our curve didn't actually start here at the center. But that's okay. So now what we can do is right click on our second enemy and do editable children. Then we can create a new curve here. So with the enemy selected, we're going to do new curve 2D. That way it's not sharing this curve, it's its own curve now. We can add some points. We'll add one here and here. And then in our animation player, we can set it to autoplay move along path bounce. So now it's not auto-playing the loop, it's auto-playing the bounce. And we can hide this here, save, and run the game. Now you can see this one goes up and down, right there. Oh, that is a tricky one to get past. And this one loops around. So I have looping as default, and then I have bounce as not default, and you have to right-click and then go in and edit your animation player and set it to autoplay the bounce if you want to do that. Now, we've got some extra time today because we're only about 22 minutes in. So I'm going to show you how we could make it so that we don't have to go in and edit the animation player manually, like this. So we're going to add a script here. Well, let me think about this for just a second, because this we should be able to get it to where we can set this without having to edit it. But actually, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm realizing I don't want to go down that route without some preparation beforehand. But there are a lot of different ways that you could do that. One of them would be just creating an export variable in this root here, adding a script, creating an export variable, and then allowing we could use, yeah, let's do it. I can't help it. We'll add a script to our spike enemy, and then we're going to start by doing an enum. So similar to how we did with our state machines, only this enum, we're going to name it. We're going to name it animation type, like this. And we'll have two types. We'll have loop and we'll have bounce. Okay? Now, if you name an enum, you can export it. So we can do export animation type. See, same name. Var animation type. Okay? Now, in our ready function, we can have, this is going to be fun. I'm actually excited about this. We can match our animation type. We can say animation type.loop. Now we need to get access to our animation player. So on ready var animation player equals animation player, and we just play it. animation player dot play move along path loop animation type dot bounce animation player dot play move along path bounce. There we go. So it's going to play the animation based on what we set it to. Now if we come back into our world, you can right click on this and uncheck editable children. So it's no longer has editable children. And you'll notice if we do that, the animation player will now automatically play the loop one. But because of the export variable we set up over here on the side, we can come to this enemy and switch it to bounce. So this one's set to bounce, and our first enemy is set to loop. And again, now we don't have to worry about, that's way easier to go over it like that. It's not too bad actually. Now we don't have to worry about trying to do editable children on it. And it might be fun to take this enemy here and adjust it. That's the start. Can't seem to select that one. You can probably delete it though, so let's do that. Okay. I'm going to move this so it's closer to the edges here. Oops. There we go. Right there. Create a new point. We'll do this. How did I manage that? There we go. There and there and there. Okay. And when we save, it updates it. Can run. And that one should be closer to the edges now, which I think looks kind of cool. I like it a little bit closer to the edges. Kind of looks like we've got it moving around that. I love this enemy. This is a fun one to play with. Okay, there's one more thing I want to try, and we'll see if this actually works. But I think we could make this script a tool so that it runs in the editor. And then we could make it so that every time our animation type got updated, it would replay the animations here. So we're going to make a function called play updated animation. Probably a terrible name. And we're going to copy this into it. Okay, so now instead of having this in the ready, we've made a function for it. And in ready, we're going to call play updated animation. So our logic's the same now. We've just abstracted it out into a function. Now, Godot has a thing called tool mode. And what tool mode does is it allows a script to run in the editor. So see how these enemies are moving? Well, we could see them move inside of our editor right here and watch them move along this path to make sure they were moving how we wanted them to before we ever even ran the game to test the level. And that can save a lot of time. And whether or not I'm going to be able to get tool mode to work in this specific case is yet to be seen. So this is going to be an adventure. But in order to enable tool mode, you just put the tool keyword at the top of your script. Now we have to make sure that we are properly updating the animation that is played when we change this export variable. We can do this by tracking whether or not the variable was just set. So there's a set get keyword, and we can write set animation type. Now it's going to be mad at us because we need a function for that. We told it what function we want it to use whenever we set this, but we haven't done it yet. We haven't actually made the function. So we'll make that set animation type, and we'll pass in a value here. That's just going to be whatever value gets passed in when we set it. So this can be named anything. I just use value usually. And now we're going to do animation type equals value. Okay. Now this technically works exactly the same now, because our animation type here, there's already a default setter whenever you make a variable. But we have overridden that default setter so that we can do some other stuff in here, like we could say print hi, okay? And you can see now it's printing hi. And that's because we have three of these scripts that are active. So if I come over here and I change, if I come into the world and, well, that was easy, wasn't it? Tool mode, it's magic. Now they're just automatically working inside of our scene, right? Because we set the script to tool mode. However, if we select our bouncing enemy here and we change it to loop, it still plays the bouncing animation. It doesn't actually fix it. And so that's the problem that we need to solve. Although you can see when I changed it, it did print hi. So we are getting access to that. Okay, so now all we have to do, right, is call play updated animation. Now there's going to be an issue with this, and I'll show you. But basically this will just update the animation to the right animation when we switch the type. So we come back into the world and come to 2D, and this one's set to bounce. So let's set it to loop. And now you can see it is properly playing on loop. But we're getting an error here, and if we run our game, we're going to get an error too. Or maybe not. Maybe we won't get an error. But we're getting an error, which is basically that Godot sometimes has a hard time finding the animation player because the onReady variable like this is set up to find the animation player when it's ready inside of the game, and not necessarily when we set a variable inside of the editor. Okay, so that can cause issues. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow ourselves to pass in this information into this function. And there may be a better way to do this. So if any of you know a better way to get access to a node inside of a tool script, let me know, because I've had issues with this and I've kind of just found a workaround. So that's what I'm going to show you. So we're going to pass in here animation player, and Godot might get mad at us. Animation player, animation player. So now we need to pass in that information to each one. Animation. Here we go. Now Godot might actually show a shadowed variable here, and it's telling us that because this variable right here is actually referencing this that we're passing in and not this up here. So we could call this like AP. I usually like to make variable names more clear than something like that. But that would remove the shadowed variable because it would make it clear that this right here and this are not the same thing. I mean, we're passing it in, so it's essentially the same thing, but yeah, that would make it more clear, right? Let's just call this animation. What could I call it? I don't know. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call the variable. We'll leave it AP for now unless I come up with a different idea. It's okay to have shadow variables, but yeah, it's not really a good thing. It's not going to break your code. You're not going to get an actual error. It's just a warning because it's dangerous. Okay, now inside of here, we're actually going to get access to our own var ap equals find node animation player. If ap play updated animation ap. Okay. So what does this do? This just makes it so that inside of our set animation type, or our setter here, we are getting access to the animation player through the find node function, which will return null if it can't find the node. And it always returns the first node in your scene. So if you have two animation players named animation player, keep in mind that it will return the first one, as long as they have the same name. And this is my workaround. So instead of using this variable, the onReady, inside of a tool script, if I have a setter, I will use find node. That way, I only call this if I know for sure that I actually found the node, and we never get that error where it's like, I couldn't find it. Yeah. So now when we come back to our world scene, we shouldn't get any errors, and you can see that it's still working. These are still playing in real time here. Now, maybe you want to set their speed. That's another export variable that we could set. And so we could come in here, we could do export int var speed, and then set speed. Now we'd have to make another setter, set speed, and we do speed equals value. And then we'd have to get access to our animation player again. So var ap equals find node animation player. And we'd need a new function that updates the speed at which the animation is playing. Well, we don't really need a function for it. We can just do it in here. We can say if ap.speed playback speed equals speed. So now we would be setting the playback speed of our animation player. And by default, the playback speed is set to 1 right here. So it might be wise to set our speed here to equal 1 by default. That way, when we come back into our world, they're playing at 1 by default. Now our second one here, I noticed that when we switched this to loop, it felt really slow. It's playing super slow, but now we could update the speed and it plays faster. And you could set it to as fast as you want, right? So we can update the speed. I set it to an int. Maybe you want to set it to a float so that you have more control over the speed. You can get exact values like 1.5 or 1.25. But int seems to work pretty fine here. Come back into the world, and this enemy is set to 2, which makes a bit more sense for this scenario. Anyways, there is a beginner's introduction to tool scripts, and now we're 40 minutes into the video again because I'm having too much fun with this part of the series. But I think this enemy turned out really good. I hope you guys learned a lot from it. Hope you guys enjoyed, or you all, I should say, hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next video.